Here we are. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. So, a bit of a false start, some technical difficulties, but we're still here. And that's a big part of the reason I go live, because I could very easily just record this and really, I don't actually have any editing software at this point. Bare bones on this ship right now, but keep going live really keeps me in the flow and being present. And as most of us know that are involved in this channel, in this work, if you're on your own journey right now, your own spiritual journey, awakening journey, you know that being present is where it's at. That is where you're getting the most authentic, direct experiences in presence. So I bring myself live, and I've practiced for the last 2 years doing this, bumbling through it so that I could really fine-tune being present, and allowing information, allowing energetic information to flow through me in the present moment, as opposed to it certainly is a lot cleaner, and you can really curate your content when you're editing it. Of course, I get that, and there's something to be said for that. But in terms of this work, for me at least, it's really important that I'm present and in the moment. And when I record these transmissions, as opposed to doing them live, it takes me out. I get hyper fixated on all of the stuff that's not being in the present moment. Now, when I do readings, I do record them, but that's different. When I'm reading for other people directly, and I have a very direct link to them energetically, there's no problem. It just comes through even if I'm recording. So anyway, it's just a little side note. So welcome back, everyone. If you're live with this broadcast, thank you for your patience. I usually am here about 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, but life is just life, and I have added responsibilities right now that are just impacting my ability to stay on time. And, Andromedan starseeds, let's be real here, this is not exactly their wheelhouse in terms of being on time. And I will say that is definitely part of my third house communication sector is this Andromeda nature. So I'll speak and communicate when I'm damn well ready to, and nobody's going to make me do any different. So anyway, I just thought I'd like to bring up the Andromeda nature, because it's going to be directly impacted by the full moon on the 20th, but we'll get into that later. Right now, we're going to talk about the weekend. We're going to talk about Saturn direct. We're going to talk about the Sun and Mars and Mercury all traveling together still over this weekend. How important it is that we really give ourselves the time and the space to really relax and to find stillness and calm and serenity, and to start to repair some tethers here that normally are there. And there's two things I want to bring up that some of the most profound things come through the conversations with other people, and it's just been like this all day. And so I do feel like that tuning fork experience is still reverberating as the moon is moving through Scorpio. It's getting heavier and heavier, and I think people are really hitting a wall around those things. So just hold out a little bit. I mean, Venus is in Sag now, and the moon's going to meet her on top of the South Node this weekend too. So at the very least, there'll be some upliftment and the ability to at least see momentarily what can be created out of the conflict that comes as the conflict that can result from duality and division. So I'm going to segue into one thing that was brought up to my attention this morning. And this was like a bingo moment where somebody who's really, wrapping their head around a lot of what's happening right now, and coming from a pretty standard, I would say, religious background. And I've been getting more and more people, either clients or just people that I interact with directly through chat groups and social media, that are really coming to trying to understand the bigger picture from this religious background without giving it up, but also realizing there's a lot more than we are not being told. this person said to me, I don't want to gender them necessarily. This person, it's too late now, I already said it, but this person this morning, what they said to me, so this person is trying to wrap their mind around the concept of the starseed volunteer, right? And they shared a post from someone else that was referencing like how it allows them to tap into their core and their strength when they realize that they volunteered to be here, as all the starseeds have, right? To be here for this time, to anchor in this specific resonance, and to disrupt the plan of the elite. That's the other thing to keep in mind about the starseed mission. This is why it's very particular. It's different than a light worker, although they're on the same team. There's something very specific about the starseed mission that it's like a secret agent, right? They've injected themselves into the bloodline in order to disrupt the plan, which is some serious secret agent shit. So this person said, how is there any logic to this? And I said, well, why don't you expand a little bit? And this person said, well, if there are people that volunteered to come in for the sake of goodness and God's work and fighting for this awakening of humanity to the goodness that we are, then that would mean that there are those who volunteered to come back for the other side too. And I was like, ding, 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 ding. You are our winner for today. So sit on that for a little while and see where it takes you. Because if we have learned nothing from the North Node in Gemini over the last year and a half, at the very least, we can wrap our minds around the idea here that, both sides of the aisle are certainly controlled. And it is when we play this game out until it is played out, that is when we realize that it's not about sides. And it's really very tempting to get caught up in the chessboard. And let me tell you that the South Node and Venus and the Moon all meeting together this weekend is in embodying the ritualization of this conflict because of what is created. Now, this is where the Hegelian dialectic is used for a specific purpose, right? Problem, reaction, solution. Now, Sagittarius, this is everything about it, right? The problem, reaction, and then the solution. Whereas Gemini is not actually coming up with a solution. It is just in the realm of the ideas, in the realm of the information, gathering the data, right? Not making any decisions, not synthesizing anything, not even analyzing it till you get to Virgo, for instance, right? That is when you become the alchemist, is when you go through the 6th house in Virgo, and it's the process of alchemy, the friction that is created from two opposing forces coming together. They are causing a friction. And what does friction create? It creates heat. It creates energy. It creates a fire. And that fire is what heats up the cauldron of our alchemy, right? And so it's important to realize this. And I'm not saying that there's not definitive moral and amoral, and I'm not suggesting that there isn't a side that we should pick necessarily. But let me just flip your lid for a minute, because these two political figures are going to factor into the next 2 months very directly. And I talked about this on the Equinox to Solstice report, but I will remind you again. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and there are others too. I'm not going to go into all of them. They are, in fact, starseeds, okay? And they have a very specific role that they're playing. And so when we see this big drama that is unfolding in front of us, and realize that people have volunteered to come back and play specific roles, now that doesn't mean that they have fulfilled the role that they play, and not every starseed is going to fulfill their mission. That's just all there is to it, because we live in a free will universe and we've incarnated into human form. But both of those individuals on their sun and moon, specifically, especially Kamala Harris, whose birthday is going to be on the full moon, who has the exact same full moon in her birth chart, okay? Exactly. So these are Andromeda starseed and Arcturian connections there. Joe Biden is a Pleiadian starseed, right? His sun is in late Scorpio. So it's his antithesis to it, right? If you've had a starseed reading with me, then you know that it provides attention when you have these markings in Scorpio because it's opposite the Pleiades, but they did come in to play a role. And when we realize the truth doesn't play a side. The truth is without sides. There's nowhere to stand, as Ram Dass said, right? It's about the impersonality or the impersonal nature of perfect form and the very personal nature of the compassionate human heart and balancing that. All of these things are providing opportunities, but when you start to really wrap your mind around the idea of the volunteer, not everybody's got the same role to play. And I wonder why. I wonder what that's here to teach us. And again, don't mistake this as if it's relative, because that has been the way that it has been described in order to justify certain very amoral actions that are violating the free will of actual beings. So there is something to be said for that too. I'm not trying to suggest that there is no amorality or there isn't violation of free will and natural law. There most certainly is. And that's what we are addressing on this planet. But if we're gonna go that far and we're gonna say that we volunteer to starseeds to come in at this time for this reason, we have to accept that not everybody's gonna play the role of the righteous necessarily. There has to be some counterbalance in order to even bring this out in us. And this is a very Orion starseed nature. These are the starseeds that grok this absolutely the most, as they're, and many people who are starseeds have the Orion markings. It's a pretty wide range. Orion beings and the Orion Nebula. I talked about this at length in one of my presentations that's now, I believe I posted it on the video platforms about the Orion starseeds, or how I stopped worrying and learned to love the duality, right? So again, consider it and sit on it for a while. If it's something that's really kind of like, throwing you to wrap your head around how Kamala Harris and Joe Biden could also be starseeds. Because there is no side in truth. It just is. And I think that when you realize that the volunteer missions are about bringing this forward, especially when the nodes are about to shift into Taurus and Scorpio, where again, there are no sides. It's fixed earth and fixed water. It's just direct experience of what is, one from a natural law perspective, and the other of what happens, what is created when we come together, because that is its own dynamic. So that was the one thing that just blew my mind right before coming on here. The other thing that came up was with a client, and this person had so I was doing the reading for them for the month ahead, and a lot of them are turning into readings for the next couple of months, which is why I'm offering this flash sale. I'll put the flyer up today, I swear. It's just nonstop right now, guys. Where we're going to go into the next couple of months, because what's happening here I'm seeing is that people are not only having activations, starseeds, especially this month, but it's the next 2 months are really, really big. And so the perspective that made the most sense was based on an actual physical thing that happened to their home, to their apartment building, and they had all this leaking and plumbing issues, right? And I was like, whoa, that's exactly what needs to be addressed in your chart, so that you have everything in order, in working order, when it's time for the flow to come back in, which is going to be the new moon in Scorpio, right? During Scorpio time, when everything starts rolling into Scorpio, the sun and Mars, which is a co-ruler of Scorpio, and then the new moon on the 4th in Scorpio, and the eclipse in Scorpio, Taurus and Scorpio. Mercury will move into Scorpio. So to keep in mind here that we're already getting an insight into it, what it feels like with Venus now out of Scorpio, but she was really deeply embedded in the feeling and the experience of what we can create together, for better or for worse, right? It's not a matter of, again, there's no sides in Scorpio. It's just what is. And it's all about what we're putting into the equation collectively and what we're going to get out. Subconscious or conscious. It makes no difference in Scorpio. And this is why it's really important to hack your own shadow so that's not being hacked for you. And that's just going to keep getting more intense over time, especially in November. But to take this time in October to make sure that you've set an intention with that new moon over the course of this lunar cycle, that you make sure your plumbing, whatever that means to you, is structurally sound. That all of the, if there are, if there's, like I said, there's structural deficiencies, if there's a leak, if there is something back, if there's pressure built up because there's a clog, right? If something is eroding or degrading in its structure, whatever it needs to be, this is the time to really start addressing that, whatever it is for you. And this is why it's important to understand these transits in your own chart, because it points to the areas in your life that you can apply this focus to. And so getting that plumbing, getting the network of information at a very direct experiential level, because we're going to be talking about water. We're talking about Scorpio, right? We want to make sure that it's able to move through us swiftly and with enough pressure and to hold it all. We don't want to be leaking. We don't want any back pressure that's going to cause an explosion, any of these things. And so not only was that a reference to this person's direct experience in their chart and its unfolding, but I just feel like that this is such a perfect example of what we all need to be doing or addressing. And so again, we really need to take care of ourselves right now. It's getting very intense. And the energy is building consistently right now. And at the same time, we've got to find the way to find our stillness, whatever it is, right? And we got to make sure that the inner network of that allows the flow of spirit and feeling and information to be able to be strong and to be structurally sound. So that we can find our stillness. We're not doing any of the work. It's just moving through us as a result of, the way that a system works, right? A plumbing system works. Or like if you've ever, if you have any kind of, if you understand plumbing, obviously, but like, for instance, if you have a pool or a hot tub, then you understand that there needs to be, there can't be any air in your system or it's not going to work properly. So you see what I mean? Like we got to make sure that these internal networks for the movement of and flow of information and feeling and is going to be able to hold what's going to come through, and that we don't get distracted or caught up in things if they are not structurally sound, if that makes sense. So that came through pretty strongly as well, not just for that person, but it's a great analogy for what we all need to be doing. We really need to be taking care of our bodies right now, our bodies and our spirit and our because the emotional flow is going to be significant come November, and it's just going to start building, right? Saturn going direct is the egg cracking, and the emergence will begin. And what that looks like, I would recommend that you familiarize yourself with Project Bluebeam if you are not already familiar. And I'm just going to leave it at that. You can take some time to research that if you don't know what it is, because I think that this is going to be really, really pertinent in the coming months. And if you know what to expect and you're familiar with that and what that means, it will give you some measure of preparation, I think, or just to get your mind thinking about things in a little different way. So let's look at the astrology here for today and the weekend and start to unpack this a little so we know what to expect and give us a way to be ahead of the game a little bit. You know, they're using these tools, they're using these tools too, so we might as well use them as well. Thank you again. Let me check in with the chat real quick and see how people are doing. Hi, Meg. Oh, I love you too. Thanks for being here. It's so good to see you. And I know apparently I'm one of the few people that Meg will allow to talk at her while she's drinking her morning coffee, which for many of us, I'm sure you can understand, like, don't talk to me. I'm confused. How can they be starseeds if they're clones? Oh, yeah, see? Yeah, so they weren't born clones, were they? They weren't born clones. So consider that as well. So maybe they took them out so that they wouldn't be a liability, but that is their birth time. So I have some ideas about that. See, there's so much we don't know that we have to be able to be willing to go into all of the information and suss it out for ourselves instead of being told what is or isn't. Yeah, so imagine if they're both, imagine just for a second that they're both clones, right? Well, that would mean that they actually aren't starseeds. That they were starseeds and they maybe they were a liability because they came in as starseeds, and maybe they let's see here. They certainly had the bloodline if they're starseeds. So perhaps it was just the genetics that they copied and now they are without that resonance. That makes a lot of sense to me, actually, if you want to think about it that way. So there we go. I mean, maybe they came in as that secret agent and maybe they got found right away. Maybe that was all part of the plan. Maybe we don't know everything about clones, and perhaps it would take more research to understand what is and what isn't, right? I also do believe that a lot of the ET stuff and what people have disclosed about what they've seen in terms of actual entities or not, I suspect that is a cloning program as well, and that they're not really extraterrestrials, and that they are actually, like the Greys and stuff, I think that they are part of the cloning program. Or something to that effect, right? Of creating some sort of silicone-based life form or some sort of hybrid life form that they've been testing for a really long time. That's just my opinion, right? I just don't see it as a possibility with our closest star being 4 freaking light years away that they're going to come here and harvest us. I think that's all a distraction, personally. That's my personal opinion about it. But I like these conversations, and Emily, I'd be curious to talk more with you about it if you're ever interested, because I think that these are good questions and we should be asking these questions, because this is the only way that we learn things, is when we ask questions, and then that gives us something to explore further. So yep, that's exactly it. Please keep that in mind, what Emily just said. Psyops on psyops on psyops. It's the only way that they can control any of it. And they play both sides. This is going to become very clear over the weekend if you see it for what it is, right? If you see it for what it is, it'll be obvious that the psyop upon psyop upon psyop that is meant to create conflict is how that is the only magic that they have. They can't actually create anything. And so they create through the conflict that provides the energy to create something new, right? So that's something to consider as well. And I think there are lots of whistleblowers who truly did believe, like Phil Schneider, for instance. I think he really did believe what he saw were ETs. But Bill Cooper came right out and said as well that the whole thing was a total psyop in terms of the alien agenda. So do I think that is life in this galaxy? Of course. I mean, that makes no sense to me to think that we're the only ones. But they're not coming like this. They're not coming like this. It's just not how it's not. I know that. I do know they're not going to show up and on the White House lawn, and the ones that have are, if that's the case, then it's nefarious. So anyway, God, I could talk about this forever. Let's talk about astrology, because that's what we're here for. Perhaps we can have a live where we, or a chat or something like that, where we can talk about these things, that are, all of these issues that are, or like a Zoom call or something where we could talk about these things that are, really interesting, and people can talk about their own specific ideas, and we can really learn from each other. But I think that, yeah, let's stay on task here. Let's stay on task. All right, so here is this our chart for today? It sure is. It's the 8th of October. As you can see, the moon is in Scorpio, just came off an opposition to Uranus. So let me open my notes here, because I did close them from earlier, and we will start here. Now, what we're going to find here is that you can still see that these three are all traveling together, because now we've moved to the second half of Libra. So we've gone from this transfiguration, right, where we are actually literally changing our figure, changing aspects of who we are in order to find the balance, the peace, the harmony, and apply what we know about ourselves to the social context in order to make it balanced, to find balance. And when you have two people fully capable and aware that they're doing it, then it happens a lot easier, right? When you have two fully awake people that are coming into a relationship of some kind, any kind of relationship, and realize that we come into it and then we can shift our form, and it's really giving of ourselves to the relationship and the social context. So now that we moved into the second half of Libra, this is about the reconstruction, right? That we've let go of the form, that we've spent all of this time building up and creating, right? And we've sacrificed the fruit in order to release the seed of the new cycle, which is really the new cycle that starts with the relationship. That is where creation comes from, is the interaction of these two polarized forces, whatever they are. So reconstruction is really about putting it back together. We've moved past our form. We've released all of ourselves to it, and now we're pulling ourselves back together into a new form, into something that is balanced. So we do see that Mars and the sun are still traveling together, and now we are reconstructing something, and now we are getting the ambition and the drive to do so, along with the illumination and the real solar energy that comes from nuclear fusion, right? That's where solar energy comes from. And the sun represents that part of ourselves, esoterically and personally and archetypally. So these two are coming together, and really activating, illuminating, sustaining our expression of self, the Mars behind it, giving it the initial push, right? The pushing outwards of Mars. And it's specifically about reconstructing a boat landing. This is the Sabian symbol, the boat landing that's been destroyed by a storm. And so the last 2 days have been very interesting and kind of rough. And I certainly have been feeling it since yesterday, just powering down significantly. This is the first time that I felt awake and with it, because I'm actually doing this work now, being live and doing this transmission. It's actually fulfilling me in a good way. But it's important to realize that when we take the steps to go out into the collective unconscious, right, which is the ocean in some ways, we can really the psychic storms that come about as a result. And I do feel like that even though we got the tuning fork that came in, it still caused a huge ripple effect, right? And so imagine that as actual waves coming in to shore and like destroying that dock or that boat landing. And we need the boat landing. We need to have a place to put the boat in order to make the journey out into these realms that are in the collective unconscious, in the realm of the mystic, in the realm of the cosmos. We have to be able to keep that. We have to be able to keep a connection to ourselves as well, right? We can't just like completely, we can go get lost at sea, or never go back out again, but that's not going to work either. We have to repair this link in some ways. And I think that a lot of people kind of are getting to a point of that link being just lost, right? Especially with the moon in Scorpio, like the anchor, we just let go. We're just sinking to the bottom. And many people, I think, have been feeling that in their own way. And really, we saw the reading yesterday, the happiness reversed, or the 9 of Cups leading to the 3 of Swords, the sorrow, right? The painful realization. Now it's time to pull ourselves back up and to put some work and some of our own energy and passion and a sense of push into actually reconstructing this link and not allowing ourselves to just fall apart or to get lost or to become complacent or apathetic. There's a lot of ways that this can certainly express itself. Now we do see here, so today it is really functioning and focusing on this aspect with the sun in a conjunction to Mars. Now the moon made a couple different connections. Number one, it connected to asteroid Vesta today, who is in Scorpio, and the overtones of the human relationship based on some sort of communal experience is really where we can find the spark of vitality that holds us all together. And the moon met Vesta, and so there is that link right there. It is able to hold us together when we realize that we have more in common with each other and we have a common goal than it does to be hyper-focused on the separation, right, of what we're here to do. And this is how you can bless and honor even the most, distasteful or even beyond that, people who participate in really awful things. You find the way to bless them or their soul because of what it is bringing forward in terms of truth, right? So the overtones of human relationship, what is it that what's bringing us together? That is more powerful than what we can do separately, and certainly more powerful than our separation or our division. And so the moon meeting this point and allowing us to connect to this very directly and very emotionally, right? Who it is and where, and the camaraderie that we've built, and realizing very deeply how important this is, right? And so if you're meeting with people in your communities, if you have a group of people that you meet with on a regular basis, you have community work, you have political action that you are participating in, whatever it is, it's what is going to sustain us as a community, as a and as a society, is these connections. And so this was a moment to really tap into this. And then from there, then the moon comes along. This is earlier today. So if we go back a little bit, this is all happening overnight, really. So in the dream state or just late at night, early in the morning, we do find that the moon was in a quincunx with Chiron, right? The Chiron aspect that is, getting, having us all kind of like pull ourselves into our own ego and our subjective experience, and using that as a way to not really like heal the very deep wounds of self. If I just pull it all together and kind of just control my mind, and control myself, it'll be okay. And I can be safe and secure in this world, right? But it's coming out of a sense of guilt or shame or wounding, right? Of course, because it's Chiron. So the quincunx here with the moon in Scorpio is we have to really adjust ourselves in the face of that, because we also we're feeling very, especially with Vesta, right? Just connecting with Vesta. The next step beyond that is to have a sense of humanitarianism that pushes us to save people who are suffering, like literally drowning. So while we are all like, I'm going to take care of myself, as a way to just kind of gain control over a sense of powerlessness and lack of control, where we can find, it's not that we shouldn't be looking for a sense of centralization in our own self, right? Because that is going to, in a lot of ways, protect us and keep us grounded. But if we can see that part as an anchor, then we can reach out and actually help other people who are not doing so well with Moon in Scorpio, whatever that is, right? Whoever's drowning in the depth of reality right now and the truth of what Scorpio represents, that depth of feeling into these uncharted, very dark and very deep spaces of power dynamics and control and intimacy and all of the things that Scorpio represents. We can be an anchor. This is going to be an alchemical moment where we can be that anchor in order to actually fulfill this urge and drive to help other people, right? And that'll come differently for everybody. But this quincunx is a moment to adjust ourselves, because ultimately these things don't seem to fit together, because one is hyper fixated on the self, like the ego self. And then the Moon, it's very much about the collective relationship and the resources we create together. And if you think about, again, the work being done over here with the Sun and Mars on reconstructing that tether between the formless unconscious and our own ego, it's really, again, that work is very much connected to what this is representing. So at the same time, as we are very actively doing this work, expressing ourselves, finding ourselves, pushing forward to make these, to make these connections, to repair these connections, that otherwise would have us. Some people aren't able to repair them and they're out here drowning, right? And so maybe we're drowning as well. So maybe we do need to anchor ourselves to a certain extent into the centralized version of who we are in order to keep that emotional part of us from totally letting go. But I do feel like that because it's Scorpio, it is relationship oriented. So even if it's a relationship to ourselves, we have to be willing, I think, to adjust ourselves and take that opportunity to adjust ourselves in that moment, because it's not just about us, and it's just not about us, right? It's about this whole process, and we are so much more powerful together. Now, the Moon is then going to come into a trine with Pallas Athena, and at the same time in a quincunx with Ceres, asteroid Ceres, which is stationing retrograde today, okay? Now, the reason this degree is important is because this is degree of the new moon in November of 12 to 13 degrees Scorpio. So the moon is here at that point and is in a trine to Pallas Athena. So what is this? And is in a quincunx to Ceres, right? That green line, it would be over here. And she's stationing retrograde in Gemini, right? So Ceres, the goddess of the grain and agriculture, who represents the abundance that we are able to gather from some sort of seasonal cycle. She's going to be moving retrograde in Gemini. So be prepared for some contraction in some ways when it comes to the realm of consciousness and ideas. And, the first, Gemini in the third house in terms of a growing cycle is the first time that sprout pierces up through the soil and is reaching towards the sun. And so again, you're going to start feeling, I feel like that the contraction into the yin phase, into ourselves, into our own consciousness when it comes to what sustains us, what nurtures us, and our abundance in a very material way, it's going to start contracting. So the trine from the moon to Pallas Athena over here, what is this degree? Well, it's an inventor, performs a laboratory experiment. So keep this in mind as we go through this month and then this is in fact the new moon that'll be in November. This is the ability to actually start putting together seemingly unrelated facts. And facts are part of the Gemini archetype. So Ceres is going to go retrograde, which is going to be like not taking back some facts, but really contracting on our, how much that sustains us and how much those facts and that information is going to give us anything. It's going to start contracting. And so now we are in a position where we can start, and this, like I said, this is going to really kick off in November, but this moment here is showing the, really strong connection to a strategy within us that is about reflecting back on how we've done this before, right? And other people who have done this before, right? That there is some representation that is given to us that shows us that it has been done before, and that we can, it's like, going to a museum and seeing like a sword and armor in a case, right? And you're like, oh, that had happened. That's something that happened before. And this is a representation of something that has happened before that was exercising courage and bravery and some sort of social in service to society. I mean, that's what a soldier or, somebody with a sword and armor would do. So there's a strategy for all of us within right now to connect to some aspect that has happened before, some representation of what has come before that has been consecrated and has been preserved and is given to us in some sort of social context, like a museum, like showing us like, hey, this is how it happened before. And the trine to the moon is, oh boy, this is really interesting, because what we find now is that we're taking that experience from a past situation, whatever it is, and using that as part of our experiment in the lab, right? Because we're building off of something that's already happened. So the strategy for us within, right? Pallas Athena is the goddess of wisdom and strategy in war, seeing what has happened before. And that doesn't mean we should do it specifically or not do it. It's to see what has come before in this type of spiritual war or social context, and apply that to our own work in the lab of ourselves and be like, okay, let's start putting some things together that maybe haven't put together before, right? And this is the quincunx to Ceres right before she moves retrograde is going to force us to adjust to a contraction of information and contraction of knowledge that had up until very recently been really fulfilling us and giving us the sustenance we need, truth and information and data, right? And communication. It's going to start contracting now. We're going to go back over those areas and take a look again and pull it back in. And so we're not going to have new information necessarily. We're going to take what we have and we're going to start putting it together in different configurations in order to invent something new, right? This is where the moon is in these connections today. And then the moon opposite Uranus after this. And again, it's really about the tension that's created while we feel this urge to create new lines of communication, right? Installing new connections based on what we are starting to discover in terms of our inventiveness, for instance. In opposition to Uranus, of course, in Taurus, that is like, it's really about how you're going to revitalize yourself down to the soul level. Like, what is it that you are able to connect to in a natural way and let go of to a certain extent that's going to allow you to individuate and to awaken and to allow for the trigger of transformation, right? And so this opposition here is very strong and certainly can lead to some erratic and some very some static and some you're talking about fixed water and fixed earth, fixed water and fixed earth. And so you're talking about different experiences of reality here that are in different realms entirely. And so we will have to find the balance point here, because we don't want to not establish these new connections. We certainly don't want to ignore our opportunity to intuitively and almost psychically establish new lines of communication and connection with each other. But at the same time, we also don't want to get lost in just letting this go too, because it's just so disruptive with Uranus. Sometimes it could just keep us over in that realm. And so we have to find this balance point in this process. And then the moon comes and is in a trine to Neptune in Pisces, right? This was the same trine that Venus had like a week or so ago, where it had that huge release, right? The safety valve of some sort of socially sanctioned activity of aggression that Venus came and had that trine to Neptune, and like, people just like, I freaked out like emotionally. I know other people talked about things like on that day as well. And so this is the same connection today, except it's the moon. So it's going to be more subtle. It's going to be less about our direct relationships and the things that we value, and something way more within us, something that's in our subconscious, something that maybe we don't have total, it's not so palpable on the surface in our material reality, but we're still feeling it in this moment today as well. And then Ceres will station retrograde. And then the last aspect of the day is when the moon comes into a square with Jupiter. So another fixed square, this time fixed air and fixed water. And so we certainly, are feeling this, we want to take these base drives, especially when we realize the channel, we realize the channel of expression through that safety valve, right? We're expressing it, we're emoting it, we're feeling it come through us somehow, and a direct line into Neptune and Pisces. So it's like the mandate coming in and just coming directly through us very aggressively, but there's something there. So again, tears, maybe even a deep sense of darkness or depression, but it'll be more aggressive. So I also feel like there'll be more tears, more emoting, more anger perhaps, or because Scorpio is just darkness in general. And then we'll want to like take those base drives and like bring them into a more potent ethereal form, right? We're going to take this energy of this potency at the very core of who we are and turn it into something that we can actually use in a more practical way. And the square with Jupiter is much more about, and we've talked about this many times, it's much more about how we are being supported and represented and given all the resources we need in order to really be disciplined and trained in the social context, be able to hold all of the energy of the social organism, not just our own. And that is probably the big difference here with this square, is that on the one hand, we each are feeling the draw to pull this energy up from the base and to really transmute it into something, or transubstantiate it really into something that is actually more potent and usable in our relationships, or in our relationship to self, right? When we go and we feel the potency of that power. And that's important. But the friction here is, Jupiter is just huge, and it's expanding all of these opportunities for us to be trained. And so every single scenario is an opportunity to be trained in order to handle the whole the energy of the social organism, right? The spiritualized ideal of humanity. And so by the end of today, I mean, we'll certainly have, our work cut out for us. Let's just put it that way, as the moon is getting to the very end of Scorpio. So when we go into tomorrow, which is the 9th of, hold on here. There we go. We're going to be looking at the 9th here. And so this is when the moon moves into Sagittarius. And there's certainly going to be a lift. I mean, there's no doubt about it that there's going to be a lift. Also, we have Mercury Cazimi, the sun, right? So we have Mercury retrograde meeting the sun, and then right after that we'll meet Mercury. And so again, now we're working with an energy with these three here that are much more about how to find, again, to be in the world but not of it, or even take a step further than that to realize that we've been here before, and that we want the capacity to gain an objective and calm understanding of our experiences, especially the experiences we once were deeply involved in, right? And so this particular relationship with the sun and Mercury retrograde and also Mars, all at this degree in Libra tomorrow and Saturday, again, is this opportunity to illuminate, to have a very clear and bright revelation in terms of our mind and our thinking, how we use our mind, especially with Mercury retrograde. This is a time of going back over our notes, going back over our information, reviewing, turning the lens inward. How do we gain an objective and calm understanding of our experiences that we were once very involved with and take a step back from? Again, this is really important that we are taking the opportunity to have all of this energy, swirling around each other to really give us the ambition and the sustainment and the mental capacity to work on these issues, because they're so important, especially with the moon and Venus coming together at the South Node that ritualizes the conflict of the chess game. And remember, the South Node is where we've been. So this is an energy that we've karmically mastered. We are leaving this behind, right? We are moving towards Gemini, which does not synthesize. Gemini does not alchemize. Gemini is just the acquisition of information and knowledge, and we can still put it together into something formal and intellectual, but there's no action behind it. There is no action behind Gemini. It is mutable air. It is the endless realm of ideas. Anything you can imagine, right? So it's important that when we start having a very direct, feeling-based, value-based experience to where we have been with Sagittarius, that at the same time we are taking full advantage of this Mercury, Sun, and Mars over here in Libra that is giving us all of the energy and ambition and tools and even mental capacity to find an objective and calm place in something that we recognize that we were very much part of. And we were very much part of this ritualization of conflict, the chessboard. It's been going on for how long? I mean, with the nodes, it's been the last 18 months. And so you can really kind of take that back to, early 2020, and start to really look at how that was the beginning of this very strong, collective paradigm as the South Node of how we, the energy and the creation of something new as a result of the friction of conflict. And so it's just going to be put right in our faces, not even our faces, it's going to be put right in our feelings, right? With the moon and Venus and the South Node all together on Saturday. So just keep that in mind. There'll be plenty of opportunities. The struggle between light and dark is ritualized at this degree. And again, it goes right back to the very beginning of this transmission when the person was just like, oh, how is it that people volunteer to come in for the good and they come in to volunteer for the bad? And it's just like, there you go, right? Without the conflict, there is no creation of something new. And without artificial conflict, they can't create anything, right? Because they can't create. That is not something, that is the realm of the creator. And the things we do create as humans are other humans, number one. Number two, we create art, we create music, we create poetry, we create, beautiful landscapes, right? We innovate and create all the time. as a result of direct connection to the natural world. I mean, it's something that is embedded within us, right? But if you can't create and you want to be a creator because you don't value the creator of the universe, for instance, then you will find ways to create. And so the conflict, take it for what you will, right? The conflict is artificial on some level, right? And truth is out, there's nowhere to stand in truth, right? Truth just exists. But the good thing about the South Node, remember, it is providing the momentum moving us forward. It is the tail of the dragon. So it's not the direction we're heading, but it sure does keep us moving. And it trains us, this particular degree, it trains us to be more objective, more careful, and more aware of the whole picture. So there is something to be said for this if we don't find ourselves clinging for dear life to this end of the tail, that we can see the whole picture. And again, Mercury, Sun, Mars, 17 degrees Libra. It is giving us everything we need right now in order to have a calm and objective mind in the face of a lot of conflict. So let's see here. The moon will finish transiting Scorpio and will make a sextile to a now direct Pluto. So we'll go back a couple hours till early morning hours tomorrow, late tonight, depending on where you are. And so the moon comes into that sextile with a direct Pluto. And now we see deeply, into the structural foundation. We feel deeply into the structural foundation. It's like having X-ray vision. And when we do that, we can apply that and invest that into Pluto that is now very rapidly going to start pulling the threads out of that rug, right? To the point where it's going to pull the whole rug out from under us and we won't even realize it's gone until it's gone, right? Some people are more sensitive than others and they've been watching this happen now for how long? But we can apply and invest this ability to see under the surface at the deeper structures and apply that to Pluto and because Scorpio is the realm of Pluto. So certainly it's going to allow us to harmonize with this in a way that, again, allows us to not be just like completely involved emotionally, which seems kind of counterintuitive with the moon in Scorpio. But when you get to the end of Scorpio, if you've managed to not sink to the bottom completely, at this point, you do see what's behind the curtain, right? And you feel what's behind the curtain and you are able to intuit what's behind the curtain, and you can invest that into the fact that the curtain is being pulled away by Pluto every moment of the day until there will be no curtain left when Pluto's done with it. But at least in this moment, we have the ability to have direct knowledge of what's back there before the curtain's totally pulled away. So that is one way to make the most of the Scorpio energy. So again, then we come into, like I said, the conjunction with Mercury retrograde and the sun, called a cazimi, right? So they come into conjunction with each other from our perspective, and it just illuminates our thoughts and makes, the conversations and the communication and our thought processes just so bright and so awake and so brilliant and sustained. And it's really going to help us a lot. And then I talked about the moon coming into conjunction with Venus and the South Node, so I don't need to belabor that anymore. And the last thing on Saturday really is the moon coming into a sextile with Saturn, who is retrograde until the following day, which is Sunday. So what we see here is the moon now in Sagittarius, right? This is where, the lift will come by tomorrow, and we will be having a very direct connection intuitively and emotionally, how we feel into the collective belief systems and the paradigm and the doctrines and the religion and the philosophy that holds us all together, right? The understanding is what Sagittarius really references. And so when we come into the sextile with Saturn, as that egg is like cracking as we speak, and something is released into the world that is completely new, that we cannot get around, right? And in fact is kind of our karmic responsibility, because that's what Saturn really represents. There's an emotional rebirth, right? There's a knocking at the door. There's a knocking at the door of our own hearts and our own feelings that we can apply to and invest into what is coming out of that egg. And we have to be very, very careful about what this is. Discernment is key right now. And so whatever's coming out of the egg, we're not stopping it. It's already coming out of the egg. And so it just depends on what is stirring in our heart right now, what is stirring and, what is knocking on our subconscious that we can invest into this situation that allows us to feel some level of emotional rebirth. Now, it might not necessarily go the way that we want, or it may go the way that we want. It really depends on what paradigms we are aligning with when it comes to Sagittarius. I think that makes a big difference, honestly. So, and I'm going to just leave it at that for now. We'll see how the weekend shapes up, honestly. So then we come into the 10th. This is the day that we find that Saturn will eventually station direct. We also are going to see that the moon right here at this degree of Sagittarius actually is at the place of the total solar eclipse. It's actually 12 to 13 degrees that the eclipse is going to be happening in December. Total solar eclipse, path of totality is going to be over Antarctica. Oh man. And you also see that there's a yod right here too, that finger of God to Uranus between this moon and it looks like Mercury retrograde. So let's unpack that a little. Let me find my notes here. So we're looking at Sunday right now, and there are a lot of transits. So the first one we're going to find here is that the moon actually is in a trine to Chiron. So here's this trine right here. And again, getting back into our bodies, as opposed to just our minds is a big part of this, because remember, Sagittarius is, yes, the higher mind, but there's an action. There is fire there. There is something to do with our spirit, as opposed to just the mental processes. So this trine here, can really help us, I think, get into, not so much our ego consciousness that we're kind of like pulling in to like protect ourselves, but like really actually feeling into our full body so that we can rely more on the gut and our intuition and what the body tells us, because the body will never lie. It just will never lie to us. It's everything else stacked on top of it that gets us confused. But, gut check and intuition. And this is why understanding what energy feels like in your body is really important, because this is how you're going to know. So this moment here, actually, I think, this trine with the moon and Chiron on Sunday, I think is going to be a good opportunity to practice, right? To get back into our body and tune in there to what is, what is versus trying to use our ego specifically and exclusively to pull in and protect us, right? Because that's based much more on like a guilt and a shame and a victim mentality, as opposed to just a direct connection to our bodies through our feeling senses, right? Because that's really what the moon represents, is that internalized landscape, our emotional landscape. So this trine, I think, is really going to help. And you might see some of that come out in your dreams, of course, right? Because it's going to be, depending on where you're at, it could very well come out in that way. So if you're east of here, the United States, if you're across the pond, for instance, this may come out in your actual life, but it's still going to be a lot about how you feel. It's just that when you're sleeping and you're dreaming, that is way more amplified, because you don't have all this conscious out there stimuli having an impact on you. So, all right, where are we at here? There's a lot going on Sunday. So the moon is then going to come into a quincunx with, and this is where the yod comes in. It's going to come in to a quincunx with Uranus, and then also with a lot of this over here. Specifically, where Mercury is in Libra is probably the closest connection in terms of the yod. And that again is about the reconstruction of the tie between the vast unconscious and the mystic realms and our own ego consciousness and what keeps our feet on the ground. We got to make sure that we don't lose ourselves. And Mercury retrograde, of course, is going to be assisting in that. And we'll come back over this, point in its direct motion soon enough. And so this yod, this finger of God to Uranus, this degree is substantial. It is the Great Pyramid in the Sphinx, right? This is connecting to a knowledge and a spiritual knowledge that is well beyond and deeper than what we would attribute to civilization as we know it now, like continuity with civilization. So we're looking at something that's older than even Sumerian and Mesopotamian, information, right? So whatever archaeological and anthropological information has been collected from that time period. So what are we looking like? Roughly 3,000 BC, roughly 4,000 BC, roughly. This is representing a connection to something even deeper than that, something way deeper. And, Edgar Cayce, for everything that he's done, one of the things he did talk about was that the Akashic records were stored under the Sphinx. So literal or figurative, it's the idea that our history is probably not what we're being told and that there's something way deeper. And so our connection here, again, the quincunx to Uranus is the challenge to stay present in the moment and finding that the presence in the moment is going to bring us back to ourselves every time and allow us to awaken to a higher state of awareness by being present in the moment, to revitalize ourselves with a simpler, more natural connections. Again, we're going to feel this very deep tether and tie into something much deeper than what we think we know. And again, we're going to have to find a way to adjust ourselves in the face of that. And the same thing with Mercury, trying to, again, it's this idea of like trying to make a connection or to tie something together that otherwise might be lost or broken. And again, we have to find that spot to adjust ourselves in the face of, there's no time and there's no bandwidth necessarily to make these connections and to use our minds to make these connections or to repair these lost connections when the physical world is continually being uplifted and uprooted in order to trigger a radical reorientation that will, in fact, bring us around to how we are going to make sense of all of this, and also to revitalize ourselves, right, by being present. And so when we're trying to connect these links and we're trying to find and we're feeling into this deep connection that is even deeper than our own history in some ways, it takes us out of the present. And so it's not that we shouldn't be doing that. It's just that there's something about adjusting ourselves in the face of this, and it'll come through the sextile between these two things, right? That there's something to be said here as we invest these two energies together of making connections, links, repairing links, things like that will allow us to still stay present in the moment, allowing ourselves to awaken to something more than just ourselves by being present. But at the same time, it's, we're able to transmute this energy and staying present by connecting these two, our mind and our intuitive nature together in this process, right, of Sagittarius and Libra. So that's pretty interesting. I'm curious to see how this is going to turn out. So where am I at here? The moon is going to, there's the sextile to Mercury. The moon's going to sextile Mars. It's going to so this is all going to come into a sextile with the moon and Mars, right? Here comes the sextile to Mars, comes into a sextile with the sun. So the moon in Sagittarius is making all of these connections to Libra in a harmonious way that requires our participation in some level. And with Sagittarius, we're getting into the territory of the group and communal experience. We're getting into the territory of, the transference, right? The first half of Sagittarius is the abstraction part where we are developing the archetypal and symbolic experiences into, we're abstracting those experiences into symbols and forms that encompass an entire experience. That's what an archetype is. And then we start getting into the second part of Sagittarius, which is the transference to the whole of those abstractions and those symbols for us to focus on. Right. And so as we're feeling into the transference of this abstraction, whatever it is, and again, applying it to and investing it in all this energy in Libra that is really challenging us to find our center, be able to reconstruct those the tie between those two places while at the same time having a calm and objective mind in the process of doing that. It's really, really important that we're able to do this as Saturn is getting nearer and nearer to stationing direct, which is what it does on this day. And then the moon comes into a square with Neptune right after. Right, this mutable square. And so this is an interesting degree because it's 21 to 22 degrees Sagittarius it's the fixed star Ras Al Hague. It's the head of the snake bearer or Ophiuchus, or however, Ophiuchus. It's the star in the head of Asclepius or Ophiuchus, the snake handler, the snake bearer. And so it's going to be in a square to Neptune in Pisces. So as much as we are feeling like, we are able to really pull together our own unique special background in order to manage ourselves in this environment that is full of snakes and serpents, for instance, right? If we and remember, Asclepius was a healer. That was part of what that represented. The caduceus is the snake wrapped around the staff, right? I mean, we've talked about this, the healing properties in the natural body from the release of the Kundalini is substantial. And so we've talked about this many times with the serpent medicine and how it needs to be respected and used appropriately, or if it's used for self-preservation and to exploit and to control people, then that's where it becomes problematic. So while on the one hand, we're feeling this urge and certainly feeling very secure in our ability to do this with the moon in Sagittarius, the square to Neptune, again, is that it dissolves everything except for this one direct transcendent experience and how to apply it to everyday life. Remember, the moon is it's going to be a transient moment where we're just how am I going to be able to manage this energy, right? And manage what I have as my own special background in order to survive and prosper in an environment that's alien to me, right? By being able to handle this potent medicine and energy, whatever that is. And then the friction is the fact that there is no boundary here. There's no difference between you and the alien environment with Pisces, especially Neptune. Neptune's here, I'm going to make sure that there's no boundary. There is no difference between you and your environment. So that's going to be the friction, because there's going to be no friction. There's going to be no distinction between you and the serpent, right? How are you going to prosper in an alien environment if there's no difference between you and the environment or anything else? This is really important to consider, because this, again, is going to go back to this idea of the conflict that we believe exists. And I'm not suggesting that there are not real conflicts, because there are. But Neptune is just constantly challenging us in the ways that it, by dissolving everything down to this one direct experience of the whole. And of God, of the infinite source and the creator. And so especially where it's at right now is receiving the direct experience and the gnosis and the knowledge and applying it to your everyday life. It's just that there's nothing else but that. And so in the process of, feeling into this moment of how am I going to make the most of who I am in opposition to an environment that's not me, well, that's just going to be, Neptune's just going to be like, poof, there's no difference. there is no us and them. There's no nothing. There's no snake for you to harness or anything else. It really is just going to dissolve everything down to direct experience and how you apply that to your everyday life. And Pisces is about love, unconditional love, agape, right? This is about the Yeshua frequency in action, right? The direct experience of the Creator, and the love that we have, forgiveness, compassion. That's all Pisces energy. When you dissolve everything else, there's nothing left but just truth. And so I think that this is going to become very clear to us at the end of this weekend. And with Saturn stationing direct, boy, that's going to be a big eye opener. Okay. So through the week, we're going to have our first quarter square on the 12th, right? With a moon in Capricorn. So things are going to get pretty serious. We're going to feel very serious, and we're going to, again, be challenged. Again, what are we going to do? Are we going to revive ourselves by returning to this source, right? As a collective, like everybody, like a crowd coming to the beach and like getting refreshed? Or are we going to give into the feeling that this is a relay race? And I'm not saying that's good or bad. It's just the square is going to bring it right to our direct attention. And that means the moon is going to conjunct Pluto through the week as well. It also means that Venus, look at this, Venus is in a sextile to a now direct. Remember where the moon was over the weekend? The knock on the door, Cupid knocking, the emotional rebirth. Well, that was just a little blip, right? A little intuitive like ripple. Now it's going to be very much right in our reality, right? In our relationships, our resources, whatever it is that we value and that is the object of our desire is going to be stirred and is going to stir this emotional rebirth in the face of now this direct Saturn. Oh boy. Wow. And then the moon will come. So the moon's moving through Capricorn, right? So it's already met Neptune, now direct. So that's going to bring a lot of stuff right up to the surface. Then the moon is going to meet that direct Saturn. And so we're going to have a very emotional connection to what's coming out of the egg, right? We're going to have almost emotionally identify with it, or certainly, have this kind of aloof Aquarian thing, like, oh, that's happening, right? Or certainly be detached. That's the other aspect of it, to not even have a feeling about it. So it just depends on how Aquarian you really are with your moon. And then it's going to square Uranus as well. So that's going to be interesting, only because the Uranus is in the sign that the moon is exalted in, and then the moon is in Uranus, the sign of Uranus. And so 14 degrees Aquarius is a train entering a tunnel. Let me make sure. In terms of Sabian symbols, I know the Chandra symbols are different, and I haven't really used many of those because this is just working so well for me, the Sabian symbols. But yeah, a train entering a tunnel, right? So again, there is a sense of bypassing some sort of evolution, or bypassing a natural evolution, right? By going through the tunnel. And again, a square to Uranus and Taurus, about being present in the present moment. Oh man, I don't know what's coming, but it seems pretty big. And it seems like we really have to be aware of the pitfalls that are coming, because we could easily get pulled into something that we may not actually want to be part of. So the 15th is our next Friday, and that's when the sun is in a trine to Jupiter. So we have an air trine with Jupiter and the sun. So the sun will be in conjunction with Spica, right? And then just where Mercury was when it was going through its the beginning of its retrograde. So the sun now, right, the rooster crowing at dawn, right, heralding the new beginnings. It's not so much that we create and manifest, we align with what is and find joy in the renewal and in the new beginning. The rooster crowing doesn't bring the sun up. It just is a it's like the trumpet, you know what I mean? It's letting us know that it's here, and being joyful about it, right? Like acknowledging the rebirth and the new day. And this trine with Jupiter, wow, this is beautiful and very expansive, in terms of the training, right? The discipline, that we experience. So I feel like that this trine by the end of next week on Friday is going to be very enlightening and very expansive, and we're going to receive a lot with this trine. You know, Jupiter is all about like giving of resources, benefactor, advocate, right? Good fortune and luck. And even though it's retrograde, it's still expanding all of this within us. And then Spica is all about wealth, you know, because it's all about the abundance of what sustains and nourishes us. What that is our wealth, right? Is the natural world being brought to fruition and us being able to access it. I think that this is going to be by Friday, very much an opportunity here to collect on something that will at the very same time allow for us to be able to harness and to be very disciplined with and responsible for the energy of the social organism, right? Every single situation has been training us and setting us up to really be able to handle the fullness of the Aquarian archetype. And it requires a lot of thoughtfulness. It requires discipline. It requires training. It requires a certain level of intelligence and almost genius with Aquarius. And so the sun, it just feels like so big and expansive by the 15th. And so this is something to look forward to, I think, in terms of the Spica nature. So Spica always, just even in ancient astrology, Spica always portends like riches and wealth unfolding if for the right reasons, right? If it's in service to humanity, if it's in service to your community, right? If you're really doing the work for the long term, the big picture, right? Not just for yourself, then you will gather the return. And in this way, I feel like that this is what can be really applied to the larger social organism, the spiritualized ideal of the social organism. So I think that that's plenty of information to work with right now, my friends. So I'm going to leave it at that for today and check in with the trap. Yes, Emily, I did have an energy shift. And I'm sure that there's probably something we can look at in the astrology that's just like, oh, hey, something happened. But it's really just when you're present and you're doing what you're here to do, it's like it infuses you. And I have definitely been feeling like shit. There's no lie about that. There's a lot on my plate. There's a lot of stress on my plate. My cycle is ending right now. So you know how that goes. I'm going to be going to Pittsburgh tomorrow to see my dad and give my mom some support. And I know that's going to take a lot out of me. I kind of don't want to, but I do. So I'm really trying to conserve my energy. But you said, what a great feeling that is when you've been feeling crummy. It's like, oh, here I am. Yeah, that's exactly what it felt like. So I'm sure it'll go back to, oh, there I go. But that's just part of the oscillation, right? It's part of being able to find your calm and your center in the midst of like this dynamic process that's always in action of the time wave, of the wave of electromagnetism, of the wave of all energy, really, it functioning, and it's in a wave function. And so we need to find the still point, the center of that as the movement is happening. So, and this is why I use the analogy at the very beginning about how, making sure your lines are clear, making sure that the lines that allow the flow are going to be clear. And if you need to upgrade them, make sure they get upgraded, right? Make sure that they're strong but elastic, right? You want to make sure that things can move freely because they're going to move. And I think that this trine with Sun and Jupiter at the end of the week next Friday is going to really, really help with this if we have been struggling. And I think part of the struggle in this week that's coming is also part of the preparation, like how we are being trained by every situation, and how it gives us an opportunity every step of the way to go back over ourselves and check in again and be present. And all these connections to Uranus throughout the week, again, are going to bring us back to that point of, Uranus is really the patron, of course, of the Aquarian age, because it's the planet that rules Aquarius. And so we want to, be able to handle the intensity of what Uranus represents. And in the chart, the natal chart, or in a reading, or astrology reading, Uranus is radical reorientation. There's never any stability with Uranus, ever. That's what it does. It triggers revolution. It triggers individuation. It triggers, new reorientation of perspective, because this is what is needed in order to wake up, right? Wake up out of the matrix, right? Capricorn is the matrix of reality. It is the unfolding of the fractal of reality, whether it be artificial or natural. That is where we need to ask questions and be aware of. And Aquarius is the energy that is going through that matrix, and that is where a lot of power really is. And so we have to be very clear about what experience we want to have in that social organism. And Uranus is going to be the one that really leads the way. And so as Uranus is doing what Uranus is doing to our very material, valued reality, we can use that as opportunities to awaken all the time. And being present right now is one of the best things that we can do. And that means being present in your body, and your body is like, you need to stop, then that's what you need to do. If you need to be revitalized by something very simple, like being outside, or, working in your garden, or just taking a nap, oh my God, like, you can do it. So, all right. Okay. Now I'm going to leave it there. I think we've gone plenty over, guys. So thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. If you are interested in a reading, you can check out my website, and that's linked in the description box below. You also, if you keep an eye on social media, Facebook or Telegram, if you're not following there right now, I'm going to send out a flyer today for the next 2 months, a special for a reading for the next 2 months up to the solstice. And if you don't like social media, but you want to stay in contact with things like that, get on my mailing list. You can either email me and I'll put you on it, or you can go to my website and there's a flash page that comes up on the homepage, and you can just put in your name and email. And you don't have to put in anything. You don't even have to put in your real name. It doesn't matter. Just, you can put in your email address, and then you'll get updates about things like this when I have sales or packages or new services, and you don't want to use social media, because I totally get that. All right, guys, thank you for being here. Have a great weekend. Seriously take care of yourself, and we will check back in on Monday. Okay, take care.